I work as a fire lookout in one of the most remote sections of the Bitterroot National Forest in Montana. If you don't know what that is, my job basically consists of sitting in a glass box on top of a 70-foot wooden tower, staring at millions of acres of pine trees, waiting to see a plume of smoke. It's a solitary life, but the pay is decent, and after serving 4 years in the infantry, I thought the absolute silence of the wilderness was exactly what I needed. I was wrong. The silence out here isn't peaceful. It's predatory. I'm sharing this story because I resigned yesterday, and I need people to understand why I walked away from a federal pension. I've changed the specific sector numbers and call signs, but everything else is exactly as it happened over the span of 3 horrifying days last week. It started on a Tuesday, around 23 hours. My tower, which we'll call Tower 4, overlooks a massive valley that was completely scorched by a wildfire back in 1993. Nothing really grows there anymore except scrub brush and twisted dead pines. The locals call it the ash pit. I was reading a paperback by the light of my kerosene lantern when my laptop chimed. We have a network of motion sensor trail cameras scattered around the perimeter, mostly to track grizzly bear migrations or catch poachers. When a camera triggers, it sends a low-res image directly to my terminal via a satellite uplink. I checked the screen. It was camera 9, located about 2 miles east, right on the edge of the ash pit. The photo was incredibly grainy, bathed in that weird green night vision filter. At first, I thought it was a glitch. The frame was mostly empty, just the dirt trail and some dead branches. But then I looked closer at the bottom left corner. There was a leg, or at least something that resembled a leg. It was pale, completely hairless, and impossibly long. The proportions were all wrong. The knee joint seemed to bend backward, like a dog's hind leg, but it was smooth like human skin. I felt a cold prickle on the back of my neck. I grabbed my handheld radio. Tower 4 to base. Base, you copy? Static hissed for a moment before the dispatcher, a veteran ranger named Sarah, replied. Base copies. Tower 4. Go ahead, Eli. Kinda late for you to be awake.
Yes,
Yeah.
Sarah.
Sorry, Sarah. I just got a weird ping from Trail Cam 9 near the ash pit. Can you pull the feed on your end and tell me what you see? There was a pause.
I'm looking at it, Eli. Just
I
looks
heard
like a
the
corrupted
clacking of her
file.
keyboard over the
Probably a deer
radio.
walked by.
I'm looking at it, Eli. Just looks like a corrupted file. Probably a deer walked by and the sensor got confused.
Deer?
The lens is probably dirty. A deer?
Sarah, look at the joint on that
Sarah,
thing. That's not a deer.
look at the joint on that thing.
Well, what else
That's
would
not
it
a
be?
deer.
Eli.
Eli.
Deer.
Her
Log it
voice
as a
dropped an
false
octave,
alarm.
shifting
Do
from
not
friendly
leave the
to
tower
strictly
investigate.
professional.
I repeat.
It's a deer.
Stay in the box.
Log it as a false alarm. Do not leave the tower to investigate. We've got a heavy fog bank rolling in tonight. I repeat, stay in the box. Copy that, base.
Copy
Tower
that, base.
4
Tower
out.
4 out.
I put the radio down, but I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. Sarah had sounded nervous. I spent the rest of the night pacing the small 4x1 4-foot cabin, staring out into the pitch-black tree line with my binoculars. The fog rolled in just like she said, swallowing the forest in a thick, milky sea. Wednesday morning arrived, cold and damp. The fog hadn't lifted. It just turned from black to a blinding, depressing gray. Being cooped up was messing with my head. I needed to stretch my legs. Despite Sarah's warning the night before, I geared up. I packed my heavy flashlight, my bear spray, and my sidearm, a 357 Magnum I brought against park regulations. When you're 3 hours from the nearest paved road, you don't rely on pepper spray alone. I climbed down the wooden steps and hiked the 2 miles to Trail Cam 9. The air in the ash pit always feels wrong. It's too quiet. No birds, no insects, just the crunch of dead pine needles under my boots. I found the camera strapped to a charred oak tree. I checked the lens. It was perfectly clean. No dirt, no smudges. I looked down at the dirt trail where the thing had been standing. There were footprints. They weren't hooves. They were bare human footprints. But they were massive, at least 18 inches long, and the toes were deeply dug into the soil, as if whoever left them was carrying an immense weight. The tracks led off the trail, heading straight down into the steepest, most dangerous part of the ravine. I crouched down to examine them, and that's when I smelled it. It was a sickly, sweet odor, like rotting meat mixed with copper wire and ozone. It hit the back of my throat and made me gag. Then, I noticed something half buried in the ash near the deepest footprint. I dug it out. It was a metal Zippo lighter, the kind soldiers used to carry. It was heavily tarnished, but completely unburned. I flipped it over. Engraved on the back were the words, "Property of Tower 7." My blood froze. Tower 7 was the watchtower that used to sit in this valley. It burned down in the 1993 fire. The ranger inside didn't make it out. I didn't stick around. I shoved the lighter into my pocket and speed walked back to my tower, locking the heavy trapdoor behind me. That night, things escalated from unsettling to pure nightmare. It was around 2 hours. The fog was so thick it pressed against the glass windows like wet cotton. I couldn't see the catwalk outside my cabin. I was trying to sleep when my main base station radio hissed to life. Not the handheld, but the heavy-duty rig wired to the antenna on the roof. Crackle. Pop. .A-Day. Mayday. I shot up in bed, instantly wide awake. I grabbed the mic. Base, this is Tower 4.
Copy.
Did you copy that distress call? Nothing from Sarah. Just dead air. The voice came through the speaker again. It was distorted, coded in static, sounding incredibly distant. Mayday. This is Tower 7. The fire has cut off the access road. The cabin is filling with smoke. Please, is anyone on this frequency? I'm trapped. My hands started shaking. I stared at the radio. Tower 7 had been gone for 30 years. I pressed the transmit button.
Sarah, are you there?
Whoever is broadcasting on this channel, this is a federal emergency frequency. Identify yourself. The static hummed. Then the voice replied, but it was different. It wasn't distorted anymore. It was crystal clear, sounding like the person was standing right behind my chair. I'm burning, Eli. It hurts so much. I dropped the mic like it was molten iron. It knew my name. Suddenly, all 4 sides of my glass cabin lit up with a blinding crimson light. I scrambled back against the center console. Outside, down in the ash pit, a military-grade emergency flare had been popped. It was illuminating the thick fog in a hellish red glow. But that wasn't the worst part. Through the red-tinted fog, about 50 yards away and 70 feet up in the air, perfectly level with my cabin, I saw a silhouette. It was hovering, just floating there in the empty air. It was incredibly tall, impossibly thin, and its limbs hung down like dead tree branches. My radio clicked on by itself. Open the door, Eli. Let me in. It's cold outside. I drew my magnum, aimed it at the glass, and screamed, If you come near this tower, I will blow you to pieces. The silhouette didn't move. It just hung there in the red fog. Then, a completely different voice came through the radio. It was Sarah. Eli, thank God. We've been trying to reach you. There's a massive forest fire sweeping up the eastern ridge. You need to evacuate immediately. Climb down and head north toward the old logging road. I froze. I looked out the windows. The red glow from the flare was fading, but I didn't see any forest fire. I didn't smell any smoke. Sarah, I don't see a fire. It's moving fast through the underbrush, Eli. You don't have time. Get out of the tower now. Go north into the woods. I have an extraction team waiting for you. Her voice sounded panicked, frantic. It sounded exactly like her. I grabbed my go bag, shoving my keys and flashlight inside. I was just about to unlatch the heavy trapdoor when I stopped. Something was wrong. Sarah, I said into the radio, my voice trembling. What's the protocol code for a Class 4 evacuation? Eli, there's no time for protocol. Get out of the tower. Sarah, tell me the code. You drilled it into my head on my first day. Total silence on the radio. I looked back out the window. The tall, thin silhouette had moved. It wasn't hovering 50 yards away anymore. It was standing on the catwalk, right outside my glass window. It had no face, just pale, taut skin stretched over a skull. But the bottom half of its face split open, revealing a vertical maw lined with what looked like human teeth. And from that mouth, in Sarah's exact voice, it said, Code Red, Eli. Please, let me in. I didn't think. I fired. The 357 rounds shattered the thick observation glass. The creature didn't bleed. It let out a screech that sounded like a metal tang, a sound so loud it physically ruptured my left eardrum. Warm blood immediately poured down my neck. The creature vaulted backward off the catwalk, diving into the 70-foot drop below, vanishing into the fog. I didn't wait. I knew it wasn't dead. I knew it was waiting for me at the bottom of the stairs. I grabbed the emergency rappelling rope we use for maintenance, tied it to the heavy cast iron stove in the center of the room, kicked out the rest of the broken window, and slid down the opposite side of the tower. The friction burned right through my gloves, tearing the skin off my palms. I hit the dirty lawn, fracturing my ankle. I didn't care. I ran south, away from the ash pit, away from the extraction team the voice told me to go to. I hiked through the dark, dense brush for 6 hours, guided only by my compass and the sheer terror pumping through my veins. Every time the wind blew, I thought I heard my own voice calling out from the trees behind me. Help me. I fractured my ankle. Please. I made it to the highway just after sunrise. A logging truck picked me up. The driver took one look at my blood-soaked uniform, my mangled hands, and the wild look in my eyes, and he just hit the gas. When I got to the hospital, the local sheriff came to take my statement. I told him everything. The camera, the lighter, the mimic, the broken glass. He stopped taking notes about halfway through. He gave me a look of deep, exhausted pity. "Son," he said quietly,
"Son,
Tower 7 didn't burn
Tower
down
7
in
didn't burn down in
1993.
1993.
The ranger stationed there, a guy named Marcus.
The ranger
He
station
went
there, a guy named
completely
Marcus.
insane, claimed the voices of dead
Completely
hikers were coming through his
Claimed the
radio.
voices of dead
He
hikers were
barricaded
coming
himself
through his
inside
radio.
and set the tower on fire
Barricaded
himself. The sheriff stood up,
We'll send a
adjusting
team
his
up to
belt.
Tower 4 to pack
We'll
up
send a
your
team
things,
up to
but
Tower 4 to
I
pack up
suggest
your
you take your
things.
pension buyout
But
and
I
go back
suggest you
east.
take your pension buyout and
woods
go
out
back
here,
east. The woods
they
out
don't like
here,
visitors.
they don't like visitors. I resigned effective immediately. I packed my apartment in town and drove straight to the airport. I'm safe now. I'm back in a crowded city surrounded by concrete and noise. But there's one detail I didn't tell the sheriff. A detail that's keeping me awake right now. When I finally got back to my apartment to pack, my cell phone had a single unread voicemail. I didn't have cell service up in the tower. The voicemail was left exactly at 3:15 a.m., the exact moment I was sliding down that rope in the dark. I hit play. It was the sound of heavy, static-filled breathing. And then, a voice whispered. Not Sarah's voice. Not the dead ranger's voice. It was my voice. I'll see you in the city, Eli. End of transmission.